back, everybody, to this episode of the Baseline Facetime podcast, episode 30, recording on January 30th. If you're new to the show, welcome. We're glad that you are tuning in with us for this episode. You can contact us at baselinefacetimePodcast@gmail.com. Be sure to keep up with us on Instagram at Baseline Facetime Podcast. And wherever you're listening or watching or whatever, again, glad that you are doing that, whether it's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Pocket Casts, and maybe you're even watching on YouTube. There's a ton of ways to find us, so make sure that you do that wherever you get your pods. So we've got a special guest today joining us, a really unique episode that we're going to dive right into. So we got a guest. His name is Michael. He runs an Instagram page called Trust the Love, love spelled L-U-V, and we're going to let him just kind of talk about that. Michael, what's up, man?
Hey, man, how's it going? Thanks a lot again for having me. Really appreciate it. Really appreciate, having this platform and allowing others to join and spread their, wherever it may be, their social medias, their knowledge, all that stuff. But yeah, I'm a huge Sixers fan. I run Trust the Love on Instagram. I'm really just trying to grow that page, get the name out there as much as possible. Just really trying to just honestly spread good vibes. I know it sounds kind of corny, but just trying to just make some noise,
Yeah,
I also
for sure.
have a YouTube channel. It's just Trust to Love. That's pretty new, actually. I just started really posting on that, close to 100 subs. Really trying to grind that too. But yeah, I'm really glad to be here, and again, thanks for having me.
Yeah, man. Sounds good. So, I've been following that Instagram page just as a Sixers fan for a while now. I think you told me it's been active for, close to 3 years, and I'm sure that's a grind. I know you've got, a pretty good following on that page, and so why and who should go follow you on that platform?
Well, I mean, for the why, I would just say if you enjoy good content, good conversation me, I respond to all the comments, but with everyone else too, we have a pretty solid community over there in the comments. People like to engage and all that stuff. And for
Hmm.
the who, mostly just Sixers fans and general NBA fans. I post some general NBA stuff over there too sometimes, with whether it be Instagram stories or some form of Sixers versus other NBA players or comparisons and stuff like that. But just general, just overall basketball fans, if you like basketball, if you like the Sixers, then I can guarantee that the page is for you, honestly.
Absolutely, absolutely. So hopefully, people transition over there again. That's Trust the Love. I'm assuming that's hybrid on like Trust the Process and the City of Brotherly Love in Philadelphia.
Yes, exactly.
Good
Exactly.
idea with that. And then the YouTube channel. So tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, yeah, me and my cousin, and well, actually, both my cousins started the Instagram, like I mentioned to you a couple years ago. We kind of ran with that name, and then the YouTube. I mean, we've been a little on and off with that. We've been experimenting with some different things on YouTube. For now, I'm really just posting Sixers videos, just trying to go a little bit more in depth with some of the things I post about on the Instagram, and
Hmm.
just give like some of my raw thoughts on certain topics, whether it be like a good game from Embiid or the struggles Ben Simmons has been having. But for the most part with the YouTube, I'm really just experimenting and trying a new form of content because I mostly do images and like written content on the Instagram. So I'm really
Hmm.
working with like audio and visual content on the YouTube, like I said, just to experiment and just to try different things out. And it's going pretty good so far. I've been consistent with it. Hopefully get some more subscribers over there. Um, so I mean, yeah, just been trying to be consistent.
For sure, for sure. Yeah, you definitely, again, just as a follower of that page for, I don't even know, a year or two maybe. It's definitely solid, and I highly recommend it. Sixers fans, even non-Sixers fan. I think that you produce content. And we'll get into actually one of the posts that I saw yesterday. You produce content that's not biased. You know what I mean? And that's a big
I
thing.
do
And it's
try. I really try.
yeah. Yeah, and it's sometimes, I mean, that can be difficult. Like, of course, if you're a team page, you're gonna be supportive of the team and that kind of thing. But
Hmm.
you definitely give some good outlooks and things like that. So with that being said, we're going to talk a lot about the Sixers. And so just to kind of go back and forth with you on, your thoughts on this team, and that kind of thing, we'll get into some Sixers talk and then some more general NBA stuff will be kind of how the pod will be running today. Sound good?
Sweet. Sounds great.
All
Let's do
right.
it.
So what's your take on the ceiling for this 76ers team currently sitting at 14-6 and atop the Eastern Conference? What's the ceiling for them long term?
Well, long term, at least right now, I feel like it's a little bit difficult to determine the ceiling only because it's still really early in the season and the Sixers still have a lot of, I guess you could say, like highlighted matchups to really
Mm-hmm.
see where they stack up against the entire league, really. And the Lakers game this past week was a pretty good marker of that. I think we need to see a little bit more of that, especially with, like I said, those better and higher teams in the league. But right now, I mean, I don't know. I don't know why the Sixers can't make a run for at least the Eastern Conference Finals. I really think that should be the goal for them. Obviously, you want to make it to the finals and win the finals. That's the goal for any team. But at minimum, I would say the Eastern Conference Finals
Okay.
simply because of the last few seasons they haven't reached that, and they've been close sometimes and they haven't been close others. So I would say the Eastern Conference Finals. It has to be.
Sure. Sure. Yeah, I would agree with that. And that's certainly been the talk even just, for a couple years now. Like, okay, when's this team going to take that next step? We obviously know what happened, a couple years ago with Toronto in Game 7
Oh
and then
man.
last year the struggle, but with Ben going down in the bubble. But yeah, I would have to agree with that, and I would also agree with the first point that you made. I mean, this Sixers team were again 14-6, top of the Eastern Conference, blah blah blah, but one of the weaker schedules so far. Again, we got a good test with the Lakers, but we played Miami Heat twice without their star-studded crew. We played, a couple other teams without some of their key pieces, and so it's going to be interesting once you get into, playing the Milwaukee's, playing the Nets, playing the Clippers, and just kind of seeing where they really truly stack up. Are they one of the elites or are they not? So that'll be definitely something to watch for moving forward. So speaking of the Clippers. The Sixers' new head coach is Doc Rivers, and they obviously got Daryl Morey from the Rockets. What's your thoughts on those two guys, and maybe even how they've kind of handled things this far? With the James Harden deal and all that stuff.
Honestly, at the start, I was not a huge fan of Morey or Rivers. I really wanted the Sixers to sign Mike D'Antoni as the coach, and honestly, once they brought kicked out every of Colangelo's people, I wasn't really expecting much. I wasn't really sure where they were going to go with the whole president search. But once they got Daryl Morey, I was a little bit pessimistic, if that's the word.
Okay.
I was a little scared that he would try and replicate what he did in Houston with the whole small ball, micro ball kind of thing, and try and just bring his style of basketball to the Sixers, which this team wasn't fit. This team wasn't equipped to play that style of basketball. So I was a little bit
Sure.
afraid that Daryl Morey was going to do that, but he didn't, obviously. Um, I'm really, I did a whole turnaround on Daryl Morey. I really think that it was the perfect signing in terms of someone to run this franchise, at least in terms of team operations. Daryl Morey has been great so far. He's made so many great moves. He's put pieces in place around Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid, and it's showing. We're seeing that.
hmm
And Doc Rivers, he's a great coach. I mean, I was never really opposed to Doc Rivers. I wanted them to sign Mike D'Antoni just for his offensive game plan and all that stuff because this team needed offense more than anything, as we saw from last season. But I mean, in the end, the same thing. I came around to Doc Rivers. I'm really impressed with what he's done so far with his team. Really looking forward to see how much how he can push this team even further. Really liking the Doc Rivers and Daryl Morey signing.
Yeah, I mean it's hard to argue with the results so far, and just again what they've done with this team so far and the key pieces that they've brought in. Um, Out goes Al Horford. Thank goodness.
Hmm.
I know you feel the
Oh
same
man,
way.
I couldn't have been happier when that trade got announced. I think it was draft night. I was like,
Yep,
yes, we needed
yep.
that.
And then in comes Danny Green. Out goes Josh Richardson, and in comes Seth Curry. Which and I think I agree with the fact, and I'll get your take on that, but regarding just the starting five comparison from last year to this year, with the new two in and the old two on their way out, I mean, you could make the argument that the last year's starting five is more talented, in a sense. Al Horford's a respected veteran, blah, blah, blah. Like, he didn't fit well, obviously. The guys that we have now, I think, are just a better fit. Jay Rich is an extremely talented defender, extremely talented, kind of can do it all, not exceptionally well offensive end. And then you bring a Seth Curry guy who is obviously known for his shooting. You know what I mean? He's kind of a little more limited in a sense, though I actually have been impressed with the way he's been able to dribble and drive so far this year. But, it's a better fit, not necessarily better talent. And so let's talk about the big fella.
Let's do it.
All right, I know you want to talk about him. So Joel Embiid and his start to this season, I mean, he's averaging, I think, over 28, 11 boards, shooting it well from the field, shooting it well from the free throw line. What's your take on him so far?
So we know, as Sixers fans, I'm sure as most NBA fans, most general NBA fans know as well, we all know how good Embiid is. But this season, I feel like he's been better than what anyone has thought of him before. Obviously, I think last season was considered his down season because, the whole fit thing with Al Horford and the whole two-center big bully ball stupid thing that didn't work out. I think that Embiid he's having a dominant season. Like, to put it plainly, He's dominating when he plays, he's dominating. There hasn't been a game this season where I'm like, yeah, Embiid, I don't know, Embiid's not looking good. Embiid has looked amazing in how many games it's been? 20 games? Well, I mean, he hasn't played every single game, but the games he's played in, he's been amazing. Like you mentioned, he's shooting it well from everywhere on the floor, all three levels. And from three, surprisingly, because he hasn't always been a great three-point shooter, but he's shooting very well from three this season. On less attempts, too. He's not just chucking up threes, which is nice.
Yep.
But he is just unguardable. I think
the big thing with his three ball, the big thing with his three ball is exactly what you just said. He's not forcing it. Sometimes last year he would come out, have 3 or 4 threes up before the first time out. Like, he's not doing that this year, and it's showing. He's taking them when he knows he can hit them. So another, point on Embiid, is he your front runner for MVP? Is he in the conversation? Where's he at right now?
So we were mentioning earlier, I'm not sure if this was on the podcast or not, but trying to not be biased because I am a Sixers fan and I am an Embiid fan, I think he's at least in the running for MVP. He has to be. Only because the Sixers are the first in the Eastern Conference. His play has translated to winning, and quite honestly, they're a totally different team without Embiid. And I feel like that's MVP is literally most valuable player. Like, most valuable player to your team. And without Embiid, they're a borderline playoff team. I mean, you really can't argue that,
Yeah. Well, that is so significant.
Exactly.
I mean, if anything proves his case, and I do think he's in the running, and he seems to actually be on a national scale. So not just in the Sixers world, but he's getting recognition from NBA news headlines, whatever you want to say. But again, they're 14-2, I believe, when he plays this year, and in games where he does not play, they haven't won. Think about that.
Exactly. It makes you think.
What proves your value to a team? And again, the wording is most valuable player. What proves you're valuable more to a team than being a solid team that literally has not won without you on the floor, and they've played bad teams. Which I don't know how you feel, but that really frustrates me when they've lost those 4 games against winnable
because
games.
Exactly, the teams that they've played in most of, if not all of those games, aren't great teams. And quite honestly, I feel like I've said this on my post too on Instagram. I feel like with or without Embiid, you should be able to beat most of those teams because quite honestly, we have the talent. Like, the Sixers are still more talented than those teams without Embiid. And I feel like those games should have been wins, quite honestly. We should have a much better record right now. That sounds like me being a salty fan, but I just that's how I see it.
Well, it's the truth. And I
Hmm.
think the one thing that I have said, just in terms of when you push toward the end of the season, I mean, hypothetically, um, the Sixers, when Embiid doesn't play, let's say he doesn't play 15 games, and let's say they win three of those. Like at this rate, it's possible. That's just going to hurt their seeding. You know what I mean? It's not going to hurt like, okay, they're not as good of a team, but he's going to play in the playoffs. But it's literally could hurt just the seeding alone if they go 3-12 in games that he doesn't play or something crazy like that. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. But to me, Joel Embiid is the early season MVP. Again, just his value being on the court alone. So Joel Embiid is 26 years old, and I actually saw a chart. I don't know who it was. I might have stole it from you, but there was
I probably
a
got it off
Sixers
Twitter,
account.
honestly.
Yeah, there was a Sixers account that saw this, that created this chart that compared Embiid to some of the all-time greats at the age of 26. I'm just going to read through some of these numbers, and then you can give your take on that. So those that are listed in this chart are Tim Duncan, Shaq, Hakeem, and Kareem, all at the age of 26. And Joel Embiid is stacking up near the top of those in terms of points per game. He's around the 27 point per game area, and the highest on that list is Kareem, so he's right there. A couple less boards than Kareem, but of course, shooting the three ball higher than any of those guys. You got Shaq and Hakeem, and Kareem not hitting threes at all. Tim Duncan hitting a couple. Embiid at the line shooting about 84%. The next closest is Tim Duncan at 71%. And Embiid is getting to the line, I forget how many times a game, but he's getting there quite often. We know his knack for drawing fouls, but Embiid he's right up there. Like he really is with these all-time greats at the age of 26. What's your thoughts? Like anything stick out on this chart to you?
I mean, mostly just to encompass it all. I mean, it just really goes to show you how dominant of a season Embiid is having. Like I mentioned earlier, these stats just show it. I mean, this was a few games ago, but I mean the stats are still similar. It's not like he has a huge drop off in stats, and it just
Yeah.
goes to show you how dominant of a season he's having from the free throw line, from the field, in terms of shooting and efficiency and all that advanced stats kind of stuff. He's just having a great season, and when you look at like this chart has comparing it to these all time great big men, he's this season is stacking right up with the all time greats.
It is. It is. I mean, you look at, at least on this, Embiid and Shaq, their numbers are pretty much identical. I think Embiid's points per game have actually gone up a little bit. So, he's right around 27 and 11 for the season, and that's what Shaq was when he was 26 years old. And Shaq is often widely regarded as, the most dominant force in the history of basketball. And Joel Embiid is doing that this year. So it definitely is not to be taken lightly. I think a lot of that attributes to the great shape that he is in this year, as many have recognized, and he's playing well. I think that the spacing around him and Ben, as you noted earlier, are huge as well.
Mm.
Any other takeaways on Embiid so far?
Yeah, I mean, right with what you said. I think the spacing, his conditioning, his health, all that stuff. I think Doc Rivers actually coaching like Brett Brown was unable to do helps Embiid and everyone else a lot because he's working with an actual coach and he's being used properly. Like we both mentioned with the spacing around him, he's getting better passing out of double teams because he has shooters that can make shots and he's confident in those shooters. He's fighting those guys, making the game a lot easier for him and those shooters as well. It's just really great to see.
It is. It is. So let's get into some other NBA news. Obviously, COVID is impacting the world, but
Hmm.
it's impacting the NBA still. And the Wizards, most recently, I think they're back to action, but they had missed like 6 games in a row due to COVID. And finally, were able to get it rolling here a couple games ago. I don't know if that's a good thing for Wizards fans or not because they keep losing.
Hmm.
But we'll see how that plays out. There's obviously the Sixers have had an impact there. The Miami Heat have had an impact just in terms of COVID, and the Celtics, and the list goes on. But so does the season, and we're still trucking away with that. Another team that's kind of facing something is the Portland Trailblazers. C.J. McCollum fractured left foot. He's gonna be reevaluated here in a few weeks. He's averaging a career high in points and assists this year, so feel bad for CJ, hoping he can get back to what he was doing at 27 a game. Their big man out there, Nurkic, also had a fracture in his right wrist. He's going to be out for a month and a half, or he's going to be reevaluated then. So a big blow to them. Look for probably Damian Lillard's numbers to skyrocket a little bit, as they'll be relying on him heavily. Out Western Conference, we haven't talked too much about that. Out in the West, the Lakers and the Clippers and the Jazz are up top. The Jazz have won 11 in a row to actually cement themselves with a half-game lead on the Clippers out there. Jazz are sitting at 15-4 and looking pretty good. And then, of course, the Sixers atop the East with a game-and-a-half lead actually on the soaring Brooklyn Nets. I think they were, you might know, I think the Nets were like 7-6 when they acquired James Harden. They're now 13-8 and a game-and-a-half back of Philly in the Eastern Conference. So they're getting it rolling a little bit, needless to say. Anything on that? I mean, the Jazz, I don't know how they're doing it, but they're doing it 11 in a row.
Mm-hmm. I was actually going to comment on the Jazz. They're actually, they're the first seed in the West right now. Very surprising, unless you're a Jazz fan, obviously, which I am not. But very surprising. I think they're really getting it together. They're usually pretty good in the regular season. I don't know if they've ever been this good in the regular season, but they're usually pretty good in the regular season. I think a lot of their success has to do with the fact that Mike Conley is really starting to find his groove in Utah. I remember when he got traded there, or what did he get? Did they pick him up in free agency? Either way. Either way, I think Mike Conley has been struggling to find his groove in Utah, but now that he is, I think that's really translating to the Jazz's success. Also, their bench, Jordan Clarkson has been playing really well, and I know Joe Ingles starts, but he's been playing really, really well, and they're really finding it moving forward. They've won 11 straight, and it's really crazy to see the Jazz in the first seed in the West. You automatically think Lakers, Clippers. It's definitely something to see.
Yep. And the Lakers have had a down week. They came into the week and haven't not lost on the road. We know what the boys did to them in the Wells Fargo Center, and then they lost the next night. I think it was the next night to the Pistons in Detroit, which made me feel a little bit better about the Sixers' loss to Detroit last week or earlier in the week. Shout out! I'm going to give a couple shout outs here to Kawhi and Paul George. Again, we mentioned they're, of course, near the top in the Western Conference, but their numbers are actually very, very similar. Both around 25 a game, both around 6 assists and 5 boards. And, of course, we know what they can do on the defensive end. So they're still getting it done. I think they actually had to sit out a couple games on their road trip, but I think they are both back and healthy and ready to go. So, again, shout out to them. No surprise where they are in the Western Conference standings. There are a couple surprises in the Eastern Conference that I want to get your thoughts on. A couple teams that I don't like very much. I don't know about you, so it's actually not a bothersome thing to me to rag on these teams a little bit. But the Raptors are sitting at 7-12, and the Miami Heat are 6-12. Do you have any idea what's going on with those teams?
Well, I think at least for the Raptors, I just feel like their offense is kind of lackluster, only because they don't really have a true number one option on offense. I think Pascal Siakam has been into that role, but I don't think he can be a true number one option on offense on a team like that. Obviously, they have guys like Kyle Lowry and Fred VanVleet for the offensive load, but I feel like they're sort of struggling just to find their groove on offense, trying to find a real number one on offense. Their defense has always been good. Their defense is good this season. They have really versatile defenders, OG Anunoby, and then they have Chris Boucher, early candidate for at least Sixth Man of the Year. I'm not sure about Most Improved, but he's having a great season, so he's helping their defense a lot. But with the Raptors, mostly just struggles on offense. I think they'll turn it around, though. I think they can slip into the playoffs. And then the Miami Heat, I think a lot of what their issues are really, like what you were mentioning earlier with the virus and players missing games, injuries. I think Jimmy Butler missed a few games straight. Bam missed some games. I think a lot of their issues have mostly just come from players missing games, and they haven't really been able to find a consistent groove, a consistent stream of winning and stream of consistency. So I think a lot of that has to do with the struggles for the Heat and then with the Raptors as well.
Yeah, Yep, I agree with that. I think, even too where the Raptors are playing their home games in Tampa,
Yeah,
I
that's
think,
also
which
true.
is just, I mean, that's like, wow. So that hurts them a little bit. And you're right, though. I think maybe, just maybe, that defenses are even, kind of figuring that out with how elite the Raptors have been the last 2 years. But now it's like, okay, Pascal hasn't exactly lived up to what they thought he might be, and that number one option that he's kind of been forced into. He seems to be a better second or third option to get his. But as a first option, it's a little more difficult for him. We'll see if they can turn it around. We'll see with Miami as well. I know that the Sixers, what was it, probably 2 or 3 weeks ago, played them a back-to-back, or 2 days and 3 nights, or 2 games and 3 nights, and Miami didn't have anybody. They had Tyler Hero and Duncan Robinson. That was basically it. No Jimmy, no Goran, no Bam, among others. And the Sixers didn't have many people either. It was kind of like a glorified summer league game, watching them go back and forth a couple weeks ago. But they're sitting at 6-12, which actually brings us into our next segment, one of my favorites that we get to do on the pod, and that is buying or selling. So I'm going to make a statement, and you're going to tell me if you're buying or selling that statement. All right?
Okay, let's do it.
All right, let's do this. So the first one, again, segueing from what we just talked about, the Miami Heat sitting at 6-12. Buying or selling that the Miami Heat miss the playoffs this year.
So selling would mean I don't agree, right?
Correct.
Okay, yeah, I'm selling on that. I do think the Heat will make the playoffs. It's still early in the season. I think they can turn it around. So I'm gonna say selling for that one.
Okay. All right. So that might actually segue a little bit into this one. You're going to say selling well, you're going to say that the Miami Heat will make the playoffs. This next one, Cavaliers, who are sitting at 9-9 and coming off a couple weeks ago, those two impressive wins against the Brooklyn Nets. Colin Sexton's near, I think, 25 a game this year, really stepping up. They're sitting at 9-9. So buying or selling that the Cavaliers will make the playoffs.
I'm gonna say selling. I could be very wrong, but I don't think the Cavs are gonna make the playoffs. I'm gonna say selling. I'm gonna
Okay,
sell
so it
that
could
one.
be that Miami comes in and takes that spot.
Mhm.
Okay, all right. This next one, we got a two-piece Bradley Beal on this one. So Bradley Beal finishes the season with the Washington Wizards, buying or selling.
I'm gonna say buying. I'm gonna buy for that one. I think
Okay,
unless he explicitly requests a trade, I don't think he's going anywhere.
okay. All right, that's a hot take. I think that's
Mhm.
a hot take. I don't know. I don't know. I've seen him frustrated,
Mhm.
last week, but
Definitely.
I think that they're going to hold on to him again unless he comes out and says I'm done, or doesn't show up to practice, or just flat out just shows that he does not want to be there, in his words and his actions. That might be the only thing that will take him away from the Wizards. So with that, this will be kind of interesting because if Bradley Beal were to go to a contender, his points per game would likely drop. But if he stays on the Wizards this year, here comes this next one. So currently, Bradley Beal is averaging 35.4 points per game. Yes, that is correct. 35.4, absolutely nuts. And he actually has nearly a 5 point per game lead on the next closest in the NBA, which is Kevin Durant, who's about 30.5 points a game this year. So, this buying or selling. Are you buying or selling that Bradley Beal will finish the season with more than a 5 point per game lead over the next closest in the scoring run?
I think I'm buying for this one. I think it goes hand
I
in
like
hand
it. I
with
like it.
with my option or my choice for the Bradley Beal Wizards one. If he stays, he'll easily lead the league in scoring. So I'm gonna buy. I'm buying that one. I'm buying
All
that.
right, that's a good one too. I like that.
All right.
I like that. All right, this next one, one that we've alluded to a little bit, kind of gave a sneak peek, but this is kind of even in regard to one of the Instagram posts that you put on Trust the Love yesterday. The 76ers will get 3 All-Stars this season, buying or selling.
Selling. I don't think they'll get 3 All Stars. I think though at max, I think they'll get 2.
Okay, all right, so shed some light on that. Who is it going to be? Why? Talk about that post from yesterday. Give us some details.
So I totally. I mean, you could call it whatever you'd like, but Objectively speaking, I don't see Ben Simmons making the All-Star game at this moment in time. It could change, depending on how the next few weeks go. I don't see it happening.
Okay.
So with that being said, I think Joel Embiid is a lock
Yep.
for the All-Star game. And then we have Tobias Harris, who could make the All-Star game, but I'm not sure that he will because I feel like a lot of fans will vote for other players over him, and I don't know if he's going to get enough votes to make it in. However, I believe that he deserves to make the All-Star game because of how he's playing this season. So I think at minimum we'll get one in Joel Embiid, and at maximum we'll get two in Tobias Harris and Joel Embiid.
Okay. All right. Wow. And I think, if you're not following, that doesn't surprise me, but I think if you're not following the NBA that closely, you're not following the Sixers that closely, that might come as a surprise to some, but I think it's warranted. Ben has turned it around a little bit, we can say over the last week or two, but kind of a slow start. Points per game has dipped, and his aggression just been a little off, but he's looked a little better, which is encouraging. All-star or not, whatever. But just as a Sixers fan, I think it's encouraging to see the way he's been playing. But Tobias Harris, you and I both know he had some hate coming from Sixers media.
He's been a baller,
but he has shut everybody up, myself included. He's near 50, 40, 90 on the year, field goal percentage, 3-point, and from the line. He has looked good. We know what he did against the Lakers with that game-winning shot, which we'll get into here in just a moment. But, yeah, he looks good. Happy for Tobias. He's living up to that contract a little bit better than he has in the past. But I would love to see Tobias Harris get an all-star nod this year. How much, speaking of that, just, kind of off the dome here a little bit, Tobias Harris, before he came to Philadelphia, his coach in Los Angeles was Doc Rivers. He came to Philly kind of having a career year to date, over 40% from three, up near 19, 20 points a game with Doc, and he's back near those numbers again this year. So how much do you think is the coaching move for the Sixers benefiting Tobias?
I really think Doc Rivers has benefited Tobias, not only because he has coached Tobias before, but I just feel like having an actual coach who knows what he's doing really helps everyone.
That helps.
Yeah, definitely. And we're seeing it with Tobias, He, like you mentioned, before he came to Philly, he was having a great year. Like, he was having a great season in Los Angeles with the Clippers. And then for some reason when he came here, he started to shrink a little bit, and people were wondering what was going on. But then this season, now we're seeing that sort of Clippers Tobias Harris return a little bit. And, it really makes you wonder, is Doc Rivers the reason for that? And I would say yes, because Doc Rivers knows how to use Tobias. He's done it before. He's maximized Tobias before, and it looks like he's doing it again. So it's great to see.
Yep, absolutely. A couple more segments to finish on as we just give a couple shout-outs here. So Baseline Baller of the Week, we've been doing that on every episode each week, kind of just giving a shout-out to someone who's been balling. And I'm going to give two big men who kind of get a lot of hate, kind of get a lot of flack just for who they are in the NBA, but they've been balling as of late. So Andre Drummond with the Cavs, two of last week's games, he put up 26 and 24, followed by a 33 and 23 board performance for the Cavs. He's up near 18, 19 a game and averaging close to 15 boards. So big shout out to him and what he's doing with them. And then Clint Capella has been going off as well and kind of flying under the radar a little bit. 4 of his last 6-7 games, he had a triple-double, including 10 blocks and 19 boards. Just a man's game there. He had 27, 26, and 5 blocks in a game. He had 23, 15, and 3 blocks, and he had 25, 14, and 4. So 4 of his games as of late have just been monster, absurd numbers. And so I'm giving a shout out to those two. Those are my Baseline Ballers of the Week. Who you got? Anybody?
I mean, yeah, those guys are great choices. I really like Clint Capella. He benefits a lot from having Trae Young, especially off screens, because he can, when him and Trae Young runs pick and rolls, he just rolls to the basket, easy dunks, easy lobs, easy points. I mean, Drummond is similar in that manner. He has guys like Colin Sexton and Darius Garland. When he's the roller, he rolls to the rim, gets the easy lob, gets the easy points, and they benefit a lot from having guys like that on their team. Both are amazing rebounders, as we know.
Yeah.
And that triple double from Clint Capella, I mean, that's crazy. I don't remember the last time. I don't remember the last time someone had a triple double with blocks. I think it might have been Draymond a while ago. I mean, there may have been someone
Maybe.
before, but it's crazy to see
Maybe.
that.
Yeah, that shocked me a little bit. That shocked me a little bit. So, um, let's talk about this game of the week. At least in my head, the Lakers at the 76ers in the Wells Fargo Center. 76ers won that one on Wednesday night, 107 to 106. Embiid looked great. Tobias looked great. LeBron had a good game. But the Sixers almost let this one get away. They had a 105-98 lead. They had, I think, 12, 13, 14-point lead maybe in the fourth quarter. But regardless, they were up 7 with a minute and a half, 2 minutes to go maybe. Lakers hit a couple threes, got a late bucket from AD to take the lead at 106 to 105. And then we know the rest of the story. Tobias Harris got a switch onto Alex Caruso and hit the mid-range. Pretty good shot, contested, and the Sixers were able to come out with the W. So just your thoughts on that one. I know you were looking forward to watching that game as a Sixers fan, but your thoughts on that and maybe how much stock can a Sixers fan or just an NBA fan in general put into this Sixers win over the Lakers?
Well, for the most part, I think it was a great game, just objectively speaking, as an NBA fan. As a Sixers fan, it was an amazing game because we finally get to see this team against one of the best in the league. You know, a lot of people have been saying, oh, well, the Sixers have an easy schedule, and it's not false.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's been used to discredit the Sixers, but we actually are able to see now what they look like against an actual contender. You know, obviously the Lakers are a lock for the finals. I mean, maybe that's my opinion, but they're easily a Western Conference threat. So it's really nice to see the Sixers up against that kind of team and seeing what they can do. They led for most of the game. I think they had multiple 10 and 15-point leads. And then as we all know, the last few minutes, the Lakers caught up. Dennis Schroeder and LeBron, scored like 10 in a row, I think, and they made it a game. And for the most part, I mean, obviously you really don't want to see the Sixers letting up that lead. You want to just see them close it out, which they eventually did, like you mentioned, with that Tobias Harris shot. But you'd really want to see them close out, keep the lead and don't let the risk of the Lakers coming back in that one. So I think there's definitely a little bit, left there. You'd really want them to close that out properly. But again, it's really nice to see them eventually closing the game out on the Tobias Harris game winner. So I would say in terms of putting stock into that game, definitely a little bit of stock in terms of the competition level. Obviously, again, you'd really want them to close out properly. But even still, just an overall great game, and I'm really happy that they got the win.
Yeah, it was good. It was exciting. It was thrilling. I was getting upset, but they were able to pull through and get a win against the defending champ. It wasn't like LeBron wasn't playing, it wasn't like AD wasn't playing. I mean, they were in there. I think they were pretty much at full strength for that one, and both teams were. Sixers have yet to lose a game with their full starting lineup this year, which is definitely encouraging. So yeah, I think regardless of, I think even Doc Rivers kind of tried to downplay it as a measuring stick, but regardless of what he wants to say, it's definitely a good measuring stick for the Sixers and what their outlook could be this year. So good win in that one, a thrilling game, needless to say. A couple other things. So Damian Lillard, I don't know if you saw this, but he released a new shoe. I don't know if it's a brand new shoe or if it's just a new colorway, but really just completely trolling the Oklahoma City Thunder in regard to that game. I mean, it wasn't even last year. It was the year before that. So he's finally releasing a shoe almost 2 years later that, he sent OKC home on the shot, hit that over Paul George to give him 57 boards and 6 assists in that game from a couple years ago. And that's actually, so not only is it Oklahoma City colors, but that stat line is written inside the shoe. I guess it's funny. I don't know. What's your thought? Is that funny or is it too much or?
Well, I mean, I guess it's a little funny. For me, at least, I was a big fan of PG and Ross in OKC, and I actually watched that game live. Yeah. I watched Dame hit the game winner, so as a fan of those two, it was a little saddening to see because I wanted them to win that series. But I guess it's a little funny, you gotta at least laugh maybe a little bit. Maybe he overdid it a little bit too much. I mean, like you mentioned, it was a few years ago, so a little bit of time has passed.
Yeah.
But it is what it is. It's just Damian Lillard. Just I guess you could say he's just trying to cement his accomplishment, in something in terms of like material, like stamp on something. So
Sure.
Either way, I feel like it was kind of funny. Maybe a little too much, but it was kind of funny.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it was just it's a little odd again coming. Not even from last season, and it's not like the Trailblazers went and won the finals that year either. So just a little strange, but I think it would have been cool, maybe a little less, just to say, all right, I'm going to release this shoe in this colorway, and people can do with that whatever they want.
Mm-hmm.
But to put the stat line on the sole, wow, that's bold. But we know that those guys have beef, but regardless, last thing, I want to give a shout out to Tom Brady here. Tampa Bay Buccaneers quarterback. No, he's not on the Patriots anymore. If you don't know that, you obviously haven't been paying much attention to the NFL out there, but Kansas City looks to repeat. They got the Super Bowl coming up next Sunday. This is Tom Brady's 10th trip to the Super Bowl, and I want to put that in terms of basketball perspective and just kind of show how amazing that is. So he has made the Super Bowl now 10 times in his 21 seasons for a clip of 47%. All right, so 47% of the time Tom Brady has been in the Super Bowl.
Wow.
Steph Curry is a career three-point shooter of 43%. So with that being said, Tom Brady is more likely to make a Super Bowl than Steph Curry is to make a three-point shot. Think about that.
That's crazy. That's a crazy one right there.
That's a good stat. That's a stat of the day right there. That's something else. I mean, Steph Curry's the best, literally.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And Tom Brady makes the Super Bowl more often than he makes a three-point shot. So just want to end the show on that note. But Michael, anything else? Again, where can people find your page? How can they find you? And all that good stuff.
Yeah, I mean, again, I just want to say thanks again for having me. This was fun. I had a great time, chatting it up with you about basketball. Always open to basketball conversation. But if anyone is interested in following, just search Trust the Love on Instagram, preferably Instagram. And if you're interested in the YouTube, it's just Trust the Love as well on YouTube. On my way to 100 subscribers. So if you're feeling it, feel free to check me out on YouTube. Post similar content like I mentioned earlier, just mostly Sixers, going a little bit in depth on certain Sixers topics and shedding some more light on topics that makes it a little bit easier to do than I can do on Instagram.
There you go. Absolutely. Make sure you get it done. Go follow Trust the Love, Instagram, YouTube. Great content. Great guy. And looking forward to all you're going to do with, continuing, growing that page, growing that platform. And excited to hear about it, man.
Thanks a lot, man. I appreciate it.
All right, man. Thanks for coming on. And we will see you guys next time. Peace. Hey, thanks so much for tuning in to this episode of the Baseline FaceTime podcast. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button, and we'll see you next time. Thanks.